have Abhi Gholap here, who is from OptraVectors and has an illustrious 2 decades, 3 decades, and we'll go to him and ask him, his exact experience in healthcare, but an illustrious decade plus of experience in healthcare. And joining us, we have Asif Qamar. Asif, as you guys know, is the founder of SupportVectors. He teaches, trains folks about AI, ML, and at the moment he's also working on a healthcare product that deals with fraud detection. So before moving ahead, I'm going to go to our guests here in the studio and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So Abhi, would you mind introducing yourself to the audience of the Silicon Dreams on Radio Zindagi 1550 AM?
Yeah, certainly, Sonia. Thank you so much, Radio Zindagi, for having me here. And thank you so much, audiences, for tuning in to listen to what we are talking about, the AI in healthcare. To give you a little bit of my background, I'm into healthcare for the last 2 decades, mainly focusing on the digital healthcare, right from my education from the Stanford University as well as IIT Mumbai. And I have a great privilege to be here discussing with Sonia the various things that are happening in healthcare because of the AI advancements.
And I'm so excited to talk about it. Abhi and I have known each other for over 5 years now.
Yeah.
We met each other at TIE. TIE stands for the Indus Entrepreneurs. Any entrepreneurs, especially from the Southeast Asian community listening into the show, are probably aware of TIE. And Abhi has actually led the healthcare track of TICON for quite a few years, and that's how we got introduced. I'm very excited to delve into these conversations. Before we do that, let's go to Asif. Asif, would you again, to the new folks, the new audiences who are joining us, will you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Sonia. So I am Asif. I am the founder of SupportVectors. At SupportVectors, we have 2 missions. Most of its focus is on machine learning or AI and data science. We look into certain research problems that we can solve using AI and actual real life problems that we can solve with the AI. And the other thing we focus on is to essentially build the next generation of AI engineers and data scientists. So we provide extensive and in-depth training, bringing up people into the field.
Thank you, Asif. All right, so let's chat about a recent advancement in AI that we have been seeing since 2018, I would say, the augment of transformers, starting with BERT coming out of Google to GPT with billions of parameters. We have seen this past year, especially, or the past 12 months, lead to a hockey stick moment in the adoption of transformers. So we are starting our show with transformers. I would like to ask you, how do you think will transformers transform healthcare for humanity in general? I'd like to start with Abhi.
Yeah, certainly. So I think that's a great question, Sonia. And I think this is the question probably many of the audiences would also love to understand. How is this going to be impacting the healthcare as such? Because everybody of us is hearing about ChatGPT and its advancement, and one day we come across to know that, hey, ChatGPT has recently beaten up another doctor's panel by giving them the more accurate answers than they would otherwise understand, or sometimes it says it's cleared the MBA exam. So I think it's a kind of a very intriguing scenario that's happening around us. But when it comes to healthcare, certainly ChatGPT or such kind of transforming technologies, which are referred as probably the transformer technology, and then the associated knowledge on those platforms, can certainly help 3-4 communities, right? I mean, one aspect of healthcare is all this something called as a 4 Ps, where 1 P stands for patients, another P stands for physicians, the 3rd P stands for providers, and the 4th P stands for pharmaceutical companies. And with those 4 Ps, certainly such knowledge transformation, where you have tons and tons of documents, literatures, publications, medical information, medical notes, clinical notes. There is so much for data into various form of these documents, which are completely in the unstructured way. People cannot query those documents at all. And that's where, unless and until somebody reads through that, and that's where all of us know that to become a medical doctor, it's a big process, right? I mean, you had to really go through all this information, knowledge, and learning curve, and then you become a doctor one day, and then the experience gets added on the top of it, and now you have a magic wand in front of you, which is ChatGPT or something like that, which is going to be now doing the job of what doctors are supposed to do. Seriously, yes, but I think it's going to be very interesting to see that how it can help in terms of all the 4 P's that I mentioned, and which P actually it will impact the most is also going to be a very interesting discussion topic where the time will tell which actually it can influence. But I think the biggest advantage, to go back to your question, Sonia, was this chat GPT or such knowledge technologies which are based on the natural language processing can really, really help patients a lot, because instead of patient going to Google and treating Google as a Dr. Google and getting like, maybe 5 answers to their question and 20 PDF files and 30 HTMLs where they get completely lost in terms of what to pick and what not to pick, I think ChatGPT way of handling patient queries could be more streamlined and more structured way to go for it. But I think that's the one impact I see very clearly, how patients will benefit from such knowledge ingestion for all the questions that they would have in mind.
I mean, forget about the patients, to be honest. Just as a regular internet user, I have started using ChatGPT as my Google for questions that don't need a more time specific answer, because ChatGPT, the data is trained up to 2021, September 2021. So if I want to learn about something that is not necessarily in the current context of time, I get much better, well streamlined answers on ChatGPT than spending hours on Google, and Google presenting us with more sponsored ads and more content that is geared towards shoppers than regular knowledge researchers. And I definitely believe that, ChatGPT has been doing a much better job, which is why now Bing search has also become more powerful, because it is powered by ChatGPT now, and your Bing search results are much better than what GPT has been showing. So I am glad you brought up the 4 Ps, because maybe in the next 40 minutes we can chat about those 4 Ps, how AI in healthcare is impacting those 4 Ps, and most importantly, the patient-provider relationship, and also P for Pesa, P for the Indian rupee or the US dollars, right, which is actually going to be spent on healthcare. So going over to you, Asif, you have been doing a lot of work in the field of transformers. You have been obviously leveraging AI for a very long time now. How do you see AI, especially this new phase of transformers, right? In in the last decade, right? The beginning of the decade was dominated by predictive AI modeling, and we saw a hockey stick moment around that too. A lot of startups being launched with predictive AI models, some without it, some just using the buzzwords. And now we are seeing another uptick in investments, in startups coming up, novel ideas being formed. And these ideas are again around transformers. So how do you see transformers in particular revolutionizing the field of healthcare?
That's a great question. See, you have to first focus on the human body. It is perhaps the most complicated piece of machinery we know. There's lots of feedback cycles. Anything you do in one part or anything happens in one part, it has ramifications on many, many biochemical pathways. It has been very hard to understand it. For example, in the medical field, we know that if a patient goes to Department X, he is likely to get one diagnosis. With exactly the same conversation, if you talk to a different specialist, you can potentially get a different diagnosis. And people, physicians, we all get highly specialized as human beings. Now, when you have a very complex body of interdependent interactions happening, that is precisely the area when it gets very complex that artificial intelligence does very well. In particular, the successes of transformers. But even before that, you could see that if you are looking, for example, for skin cancer or many forms of analyzing lymphomas and so forth in the lungs, those things are hard to read. It takes radiologists many, many years of training to become reasonably good at it. And yet they miss And when they miss, the consequences are pretty catastrophic. They're pretty sad. Right? So what we are seeing with AI, and there are two aspects to it. When you look at the transformer, you can use the transformer as a way to detect something. So it's sort of like more technically, you say it's in the encoder model part of it. So you can, for example, use vision transformers to detect and tell if which particular form of problem you are seeing in a particular image, and where exactly to spotlight and say this is where the problem is. That is one use of that. The other use that we are seeing, and that is taken people by surprise, the generative aspect of this transformer. You could give it a whole lot of information. Now, within this giant large language models, we see something called emergent abilities. We are beginning to understand why that happens, but we don't quite. But it seems that it hasn't quite just distilled human knowledge that we have fed into it. It has somehow figured out how to process it. And so you give it a whole lot of data. So as a physician, you talk of the subjective, the objective, the SOAP, what's your plan for action, and so on, an assessment and plan for action. And it is quite interesting that today, once you give it this information, it is able to come up with all this. In fact, this is one of the things we are doing in our lab. It is able to do that, contextualizing it on your history. But when it does that, it spans specialities. Some specialities it does a bit better. Some specialities it doesn't do as well, based on how much data from different specialities it has been trained for. So it is certainly a work in progress. It's not without its problems. Sometimes it hallucinates. Right. So, for example, if you don't give it enough history, it will suddenly say, you are a 29-year-old lady who is having this problem, and so on and so forth. So, and obviously, those are the promises and the perils of these transformers. We are seeing that. Recently, New York University did an interesting research, something that is classical tabular data called survival analysis, predicting how long a patient would survive given them different biomarkers. If you do it with a whole field of machine learning, which goes by the name of survival analysis, and there have been models since the 1970s. Recently, New York University applied a generative model, like transformer. And to their surprise, or perhaps they were looking for it, but not many people expected it, they found that it could do a much better prediction of survival time than the state-of-the-art survival models. So there are quite a few things that are happening. Some are surprising, some you go looking for, but we are certainly on the move when it comes to AI and healthcare.
So what I'm hearing here is there are a lot of surprises that we should be prepared for, including the good and the bad and the ugly. Right now, Abhi, we were talking about radiology and OptraScan. You have worked on radiology for I don't know how long, and you have created new machines. You have won awards for that. I would love to go back to you and then just talk to you about the convergence of the different fields of AI. Right, in helping healthcare become more better, more human. We were talking about transformers, for example, but the fact remains that where transformers are right now, there is a huge possibility of misdiagnosis. So I'll give you an example. ChatGPT is very well known for its coding capabilities, right? GPT model was trained on a lot of stack code, on a lot of data from the internet, on Reddit posts to stack code and etc. And the surprising thing is that sometimes, a lot of the times in fact, ChatGPT has been referencing libraries that are non-existent. And the hackers caught on to it. And what the hackers have been doing is they are uploading malicious codes with the names of these libraries that are referenced by ChatGPT, and they're using it. And as I am not a full-time coder, but I just code on the side, and I was using ChatGPT, and even GitHub Copilot is actually powered by ChatGPT. And this is exactly what happened. I did not download any malware or any malicious code, but it created a library. It imported a library that was not even there. And then when I put it in Visual Studio Code, it could not find it. So I went back to ChatGPT and asked, what is this library? It's like, sorry, I gave you the wrong library. This is the right code. imagine that happening to a patient, right? A
Yeah.
misdiagnosed scenario. So what I would love to ask you is, yes, the field of transformers, it's fascinating. Generative AI, the generation comes from the fact that it's looking at data and it's trying to mimic a human, right? With every advancement of AI, we are trying to see how close we can bring it to human intelligence. And obviously, at one point, it will surpass human intelligence. But right now, we are still not there. So, do you think that other AI models, Abhi, and what we have seen in the past, right? Like in the field of radiology, you have been using AI. You have been using AI extensively in healthcare. Do you think we can have all of them converge to have the right checks and balances in place to ensure that the usage is towards making the existing systems better and not really hampering the quality of healthcare that's put out there?
Yeah, got it. See, what happens is that again, I think when we look at AI, people always start thinking about AI playing a role in place of a doctor. But really speaking, even in the healthcare system, even if you go to a physician office, it's not only the physician that you interact with. You interact with the white nurse first. She's collecting all your information. He's collecting all your information, and then based on those vitals, the data goes back to the physician, and then physician is working with you. So it's not only for the diagnosis, it's also for the symptom checking. It's not only for treatment, but it's also for the patient engagement. So there are many such areas where AI can actually play the role. And that is what I think will make it more useful for healthcare. Because the moment you actually pit it against a physician expertise, I think the AI is always going to get questionable. At the same point of time, as you said, there could be a possibility of detrimental mindsets coming into this when some generative nice things are happening. Of course, some malware is going to come and it's going to mess up the things. So that's inevitable. That's going to happen. But at the same point of time, I think what I would like to mention here is that AI can still play a role in terms of doing the symptom checking. Like for example, one of my portfolio company that is focusing on the pediatrics. When a kid is like crying in the middle of the night, parents have no way to go, and so that's exactly where they can actually make use of this platform to understand what could be the reason, what are the different areas because of which they should be concerned about it. And if they see that based on the knowledge that they get from any of the medical literature, it can schedule for the appointment next day with a human physician. So it could be an enabling factor. It could be complementary to the human expertise, because at the same point of time, if you look at the number of medical doctors in various countries, I think as a statistics, probably there are something like 35 to 37 medical professionals, medical doctors those are there against a population of like 10,000 people in say a country like United States.
Or even lesser in others.
Yeah. So in India, it goes to like something like 6 for that matter, or even Africa, it goes to like maybe 2. So I think AI can play the role actually complementing those professionals in those countries where they can actually, the patients can now rely on this kind of platforms. And going back to your point of, making use of AI in other than the generative aspect, I think AI or the software tools those were earlier there, which are now eventually growing as a part of artificial intelligence, machine learning, those are certainly useful when it comes to doing the mundane task, also the repetitive task. Like for example, if somebody is actually quantifying your vital data, and then based on that vital data, it is supposed to recommend some specific test. Now that whole of the procedures can now be completely automated. I'll give you one example. One of my portfolio company that's focusing on the genetic testing. Now in the market, there are more than 75,000 genetic tests are there for a specific disease screening. People or like physicians always remember the top 3 or 4 or 5. So they will always recommend the same genetic test. But then what happens to the remaining 74,000 blah, blah, blah test? Who is going to recommend that? And that's exactly where such tools can come into picture. So based on the patient data, based on the patient family history, its pedigree, all the data can be collected, can be triaged, and then based on that, the risk can be assessed, and then the test can be recommended. So whole of this work, which otherwise a human is not able to do it, or the physician is not able to do it themselves, can now be completely automated by leveraging this kind of a platform. So I think there are a lot of different applications which can really be adding the value to these 4 P's that I'm mentioning, than becoming a competitive scenario, certainly, so that it becomes eventually for the benefits of the human care, or the for the benefits of the humankind.
Thank you, Abhi. I think that was great insight. So the thing that I'm hearing is, over the next few years, at least till we get to a point where humans can rely on AI. Like, I'll take a simple example, right? Today, when we talk about aeroplanes, aeroplanes move on autopilot, right? And most likely the pilot in that seat is not even needed. However, if any of us were to get to our gates for boarding and they said, hey, today's flight is pilotless, I don't think any of us is going to board that plane, right? Because there's also that innate trust factor or a fear of technology. For example, I am not comfortable using Alexa or Google Home because I'm like, oh, it's listening all the time. Even the conversations I don't want it to listen to. But on the other hand, I look at some of my friends' kids and Alexa is their best friend. It's a different generation. So the way I look at or interpret what you're saying is over the next few years, we will see a lot of use of AI as a co-pilot to the different professions or the different players that we have in the field of healthcare. It will make their experiences better, make their lives easier.
Yeah,
That-
certainly. I think you're putting it in a right perspective. I think that's the way it is. When I can also tell you that there are some diseases where people wouldn't like to go and meet a physical human, like for example, mental health.
Yes.
So that's exactly where the machine can come into picture. They can interact with the machine can give them the answers back. I think those type of diseases or those type of areas of treatment can really be handled by an intelligent system, which could be powered by something like this AI tool in the healthcare. Also, going back to what you were mentioning about the radiology, interestingly, pathology industry, which is a parallel to radiology, pathology industry heavily relies upon microscope as a tool. And if you give the same cancer biopsy to 3 pathologists, unfortunately, they are giving 4 answers. So ideally, 3 should give 1. Worst case scenario, 3 should give 3, but 3 are giving 4. It is that subjective. Now, how do you bring this kind of an objectivity and consistency and reliability? I think that's where the systems can play the role. But at the same point of time, I would say this is more like late 80s where Microsoft had launched Excel and the accountants were worried that, hey, my jobs will go away because now there is some computer system coming and replacing me. So this is, I think, you can draw the parallels here where the doctors are not going to be worried about it because this is going to actually make them more efficient and also make the whole system more transparent.
I want to talk about how AI improves the human aspect of things. Before I get to that, I want to go over to Asif. And Asif, yes, we have been talking about just all the AI convergence, right, in the field of healthcare to make things better. While we were talking about these interactions, right, interactions with patients, there is going to be a large amount of PHI, which stands for your personal health information, right, which allows folks to identify a person uniquely. Now, if patients are interacting with AI systems, there's also going to be a lot of sensitive information being exchanged. Besides the PHI markers, we spoke about diagnosis or conversations around mental health, for example, right? How do you think, Asif, with AI systems, they obviously have to process this data. So the data is going to data processors, right, which could be held, owned, processed by third-party companies. How do you think can we safeguard this sensitive information so people's privacy is still respected and protected?
These are considerations for government regulation. Generally, for example, there's HIPAA compliance laws in the US. There's in Europe the GDPR and the AI Act and so forth. So that could be, in my view, is a solvable problem and will get solved because the way you look at it is, it's like this. A person can give you very good advice on your problem. But it's a personal problem, and if you ask that person for advice, you risk the person telling everybody about it. Right? So obviously, you want to create a trusted system. In the long run, that's exactly what regulations and laws are meant for in society, and I think they'll do a great job of it. The point with AI, just to go back to the previous discussion, there are 2 things to it. One is the scale. See, it lifts the floor of medical treatment or medical care in a world in which there are far more human beings who keep falling sick. We all keep falling sick, and far few physicians. When you can disseminate the knowledge and have intelligent systems be sort of proxies, or at least available to funnel the serious cases to the physician, you create one more layer of primary care, in effect. And so what it does is, you can live either with a complete absence of any healthcare, or you can have access to these things which are massively scalable. That is one aspect to it. The other aspect is the complementarity of it. See, human beings and AI always complement. You took the example of an aeroplane, right? Because they are very tough decisions when things go wrong. And mathematically, what may be right may not be the right decision from a human perspective. The same is true with the medical care. Things like empathy. AI can simulate empathy, but it cannot actually feel empathy. It is not trained to make hard decisions or know what to do in specific situations, or to understand the broader social context. So what we are doing is empowering the physicians with far more powerful tools. The point is never to replace the physician, because to do so would be catastrophic.
I agree. I think in a lot of professions, AI is being looked at as a threat where those professions could be completely replaced. And to be honest, there are professions where AI could completely replace them. But in most professions, like even when I was talking about coders, right, AI is helping them expedite their coding
Yes.
performance. And I feel like AI will help us take care of the mundane, so we can focus on creating better human experiences. Even as human beings, instead of us spending 12 hours, 14 hours at our desk getting our work done, if with the help of AI assistants, we could wrap that up in 6 to 7 hours and call it a productive day, we would all love to spend more time back with our loved ones, or just improving our quality of lives. And it will hopefully result in better health conditions for the human bodies too. Now, that being said, Abhi, I'm going to come back to you, and I want to ask you, you work in healthcare, you have your own healthcare companies, enterprises, and at the same time you're also investing in new startups through OptraVentures. So over the next 5 years, let's say, right, what is that one use case that you are currently evaluating, working on, that really excites you, that you feel is going to change how things are done in healthcare? I would love for you to talk about it. And then later in Asif, I want to ask you about what you are working on in fraud detection. So Abhi, let's talk about that one use case that really excites you. And you're like, this is the use case you need to watch out for in healthcare.
Yeah. So if you look at it, like, right now my portfolio has like almost 7 companies where we have done the investment, right? From the pathology to genomics to working also with natural language processing for pharmaceutical companies. So from that perspective, I think there are a lot of opportunities, especially because the AI in the healthcare market is like, is valued at around $20 billion kind of an opportunity so far, but it is growing at almost 40% compounded annual growth.
CAGR.
And that is why it is supposed to be touching around $200 billion kind of an opportunity, 200 billion, B for billion by 2030. So that is where everybody's eyes are like really onto this opportunity, and like really everybody's thinking about what could be the next, who could be the next Amazon of healthcare, for that matter. Though Amazon themselves are probably still struggling to be in the healthcare. But what I would like to comment here is that I think, one of the significant opportunity that sits here is in terms of the patient engagement, because patient is kind of the central focus of whole of this system. Patient is going to the physician mainly because they see some symptoms, patient goes to physician diagnose the symptoms and also helps in terms of the treatment. Now, this is on the side of the the usual workflow in the healthcare ecosystem. But then if you draw the parallels and see what's happening with the medical devices, there are more and more at-home medical devices that people have started using it. So people do not go to a doctor's office just for checking their fever the way it used to happen maybe 50 years back. Now people are actually also doing their glucose monitoring. They're also trying to look at many of the vitals that they can collect themselves, and this is going to grow. So more and more medical devices are entering in our lives, which are coming to our homes. So when the at-home patient management is becoming a feasibility, there is a likelihood, if you just extrapolate the same information, that patient technically may not be even required to go to doctor's office for diagnostics, because then you can do your own diagnostics, and then once the diagnosis report is in your hand, you can always go to the physician for the treatment. So physician's role can get limited only to the treatment in the future. And if that's what is the dream that is being driven, I think there are many VC firms today at this point of time are trying to invest into the diagnostic company in such a way that whole of the diagnostics can be managed in an objective scenario. So finding one area from such a wonderful golden opportunity is difficult, but I would still say that this could be one opportunity looking at the size of the market, and that's where oncology has been always my area of specialization, given my emotional connect to that because of my mom's facing the similar challenges in her life. And I think oncology is something that we had to really get into something like a moonshot, so that people should not die of the cancer, they should live with the cancer. And I think if that's an area that can be really accelerated and also improvised by virtue of the AI's contribution to healthcare, I think that will be the greatest benefit to this humankind.
Thanks for sharing your personal story with us as well, Abhi. And unfortunately, when we look at cancer, just the other day I was talking to a friend of mine who told me that somebody close to her died because of breast cancer. And I was like, oh, I thought in US cancer treatment is much better than the rest of the world. And she was like, no, statistically 40% of the females in that particular age group in 40s, they do find breast cancer to be fatal. However, just because of human tendency, human nature, we always talk about the successes, not so much about the failures. The sad part is that unlike a hemorrhage, for example, cancer is something that kills you over a period of time. And for you and your loved ones to go through that era of suffering, it's very hard, especially when you know that you're living on borrowed time and then your health keeps deteriorating, and for your loved ones to see you in that frame. And more importantly, in United States in particular, having to deal with things like cancer treatment could be catastrophic for a lot of people who don't have the means to pay for these expensive treatments. Our US healthcare system is extremely broken when it comes to it. Asif, I'm going to come to you to talk about what you work on. But just before that, Abhi, I want to follow up with one other question. You were talking about the patient experience, right? And we spoke about oncology. During all of this time, one of the things I've really found missing that people then go to Facebook groups, etc., is for the support system, right? There is a huge burden on mental health of even the caregivers, and they lack a good support system. I have seen so many people who are working as even hospice caregivers for their loved ones, and I see these stories on Facebook. They can come and share it and they get some emotional support from there, but they don't have someone right next to them providing that emotional support. In a recent study, we found ChatGPT to actually be more empathetic than the doctors, as I said, right? Do you feel that AI could actually help bring in that empathy and compassion, even though we said that AI doesn't inherently have emotions, but can it mimic those emotions to provide a better support structure? I would love to hear your thoughts on that, Abhi.
Yeah, I think that's a good concept, to help give some emotional touch to the patients who are actually looking for some shoulders. But at the same point of time, I think, I would say that the AI's role should still be limited to giving the answers which are right and wrong, so that people can rely upon it. Like, for example, even when somebody get detected, as a cancer patient, the big issue that whole of the family is facing, in addition to sky falling on their family, is whether my diagnosis even is correct or wrong. And that is where they have kind of a syndrome where they say, oh, let me go to another doctor and another doctor and another doctor. And that's where they keep on getting 3 or 4 or 5 answers, and they will try to pick up that answer that comforts them. So ultimately every patient is looking for some comfort of some kind. And if there are some systems which can actually help them to give that kind of a comfort, even if that is not really a true world for them, but if they can be taken into that comfort zone where they feel happy about it, because ultimately mind also plays a significant role in your well-being. And then I think managing the mind is going to be a significant challenge going forward with so much of a work pressures and competitiveness around it. So I think mental health related topics can certainly be handled. And there are some companies who are investing into AI, which are pertaining to your expressions, the AI pertaining to your emotions, AI pertaining to your voices, AI pertaining to the noise around you. And then also there are some devices like your wristbands that you can wear, and you will come to know that if my noise levels around me goes up, then probably I'm losing my mind as well. So I think there is a technological advancements happening on one side. There are also the clinical acumen improvement that's happening as by virtue of the technological platforms like chat GPTs or the new generative platforms. And then on third side, people are equipped now to get into that mode, because now they also understand that given those older days of like me relying on only one doctor as a god, I think looking at doctors more like my vendors or suppliers who are going to actually fix my problems, like my garage mechanics. So if that's the case, then I should find out a right option for me, who can provide me a right solution at a right price. So I think whole of this system is trying to be more becoming more like a federated in nature, and I think that's really going to be helping the healthcare industry as a whole.
Thank you for your insights, Abhi. And with that being said, Asif, I would love to pose the same question to you because it felt like you wanted to add something to it. And then after you do that, we'd love to talk about what you're working on in healthcare and AI.
Sure. See, Sonia, when you look at the word empathy and where empathy comes from or where compassion comes from, we all share a common human condition, which is that life has suffering, life has problems, life has disease, old age, and our loved ones move on and so forth. So empathy to all living creatures is natural. We see it in animals also. However, is there sufficient empathy in the healthcare practice? Obviously, physicians who become physicians, one would like to believe that by and large, it is the altruistic motive that takes them there. Right? They are perhaps more empathetic than normal people. So it is there. It gets sort of in real life mitigated because time is of the essence. You get only a budgeted amount of time and you have to have a huge throughput of patients through the system. And I say that because my mother is a surgeon and a physician, and you can see how little time each patient unfortunately gets. Now, then it comes the question of machine, and can it be empathetic? The AI, can it be empathetic? See, to the extent that these AI, they are taking the distillate of human knowledge and human experience, certainly they can express empathy. And in the absence of just getting 5 minutes with the physician, it is certainly a big complimentary thing to have a conversation, to have it elaborated upon. And so the AI does give you a part of the empathetic experience. That is one part of it. The second thing is when somebody listens to you specifically, gives you very specific advice on what to do about it, it goes to the core of treating you as a human being and helping you get to a better place. And it is a core component of being empathetic to you. Right? So to that extent, AI can have empathy. Now, as I said before, it should never be a substitute for human empathy, because there are things that it cannot do. Machines, to the best of our knowledge, there is no mathematical objective function that can quantify kindness, that can quantify compassion or empathy at this moment. So we should watch out. Yes.
Emotional intelligence is still
Not
under
there.
development, not there
Right.
yet.
That's right.
Asif, thank you for sharing your perspective. What are you working on in the field of healthcare right
Yes, at this moment I'm working on an interesting problem. See, we look at the consult when a patient talks to a physician, the whole conversation, and the problem that we are trying to address is the biggest killer in the medical field. So if I were to ask you or anybody else, generally, which is the biggest killer? People would say it must be cancer. Must be heart disease, must be diabetes or something like that. Actually, the biggest killer is medical errors, by far. So the question I'm asking, and I'm not by any means claiming that I will necessarily succeed at it, but it is certainly worth seeing if you can we reduce human errors? And we can do this it's not a battle that can be won by just one algorithm. So it has to be piecemeal. We have to work at it, dig at it. So our approach is, you listen to a consult in progress, the voice, and you look at the conversation that develops. We pass it through transformers. From that, we generate the diagnosis codes, and we do the generation of the objective and the assessment and the so on and so forth. But once we have a diagnosis, what we try to figure out is we try to dip into the biochemical pathways and then figure out what are the questions not asked. Because it is the error of omission that kills far more than the error of commission. Rarely does a surgeon leave his watch in the patient, but it is what we forget to ask or we forget to do as a physician that makes a world of difference. And so that is the part I'm trying to address. Could we hint to the physician that maybe let's ask this question too? It may be relevant, because by nature, every specialist gets into a tunnel vision. Most people have common problems. You don't think of the uncommon.
Yes, just like Abhi said, right? Like there are 75,000 diagnostic tests,
Right.
but most physicians, the first test,
Yes.
just 3-4 tests are probably on their mind. And I believe it is the same when it comes to prescribing medicines as well. We all know that there are a lot of generic alternatives available to brand name medicines which are cheaper. Yet sometimes physicians are also incentivized to prescribe brand name medications. However, in scenarios where there is an alternative available, they can do that. And it seems like if your AI co-pilot or your AI transformer system that you're building out, I don't know whether to call it a co-pilot or not, because it
Sort
seems
of a co-pilot.
sort
yes.
of a co-pilot at this point. It seems like it can listen to the entire conversation and perhaps even hint at how that conversation could have been better, right? Like the quality of the conversation
Yes.
itself. Did you ask the right questions, not just for the diagnosis of the physical health of a person, but perhaps even the mental health? Because I think we can all agree that when you get into a mode where you feel like something is happening with you, you're already very stressed. I remember when I was first diagnosed with thyroid, with hypothyroidism, and the doctor told me, and I was 23 or 24, I think, and the doctor told me that, I have to take thyroxine for the rest of my life. And I remember going back, and my boyfriend, who's now my husband, was with me, and I started crying. And generally, I'm a very strong person. And I started crying, and I said, what the hell is wrong with my health? That now for the rest of my life I have to do this. And obviously, in the larger context of things, you see people suffering so much. Taking a small tablet doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But just at that time, your mental frame, and this is such a simple thing, and yet I felt so defeated. Being able to help navigate such scenarios for patients. As we were talking about it, I was thinking about scenarios like AI being able to tell you whether what you're looking at is right or wrong. So if patients with schizophrenia, they can't always talk to people around them because people will shun them. If they start saying that, hey, besides the 2 speakers in room, I'm seeing a third person on the microphone, right? People are not going to like that.
Yeah, I will
And
leave the studio.
Yes, I know, right? Because whether it's a ghost or just a figment of my imagination, but perhaps I can ask AI systems with AI vision to help validate if there is somebody else in the room. And it can do that for me without me having to reveal my state of sanity to someone else and feel vulnerable at that point in time. We are almost at the top of the show. So before we bid farewell to our listeners, I would love to go back to our guests one last time. And I would like for you to share your thoughts with our listeners, something to inspire them, especially as we close out on our topic on the revolutionizing power of AI in healthcare. What are the things you would say they should look out for? Not just the developments, but also if there's something that you want them to caution against AI, you can also add that. So this time I'll go to Asif first and then go to Abhi to close out.
To caution, see, we have to know that AI is a mathematical tool. And at the end of it, it has learned from past data. Therefore, we should never say, and it could easily happen that to cut costs, we say, welcome and here's your physician, and you may be talking to a microphone which is connected to a computer, to our AI. We need to watch out for that. That should not happen. Care begins with authority expressing empathy and interest in a person, in a human being. It's a very human endeavor. And so that is one concern I have. People have, and as I have said before, almost an irrational exuberance towards these generative models at this moment. And people are either afraid that it will take away certain professions or looking with great excitement that it will take away certain professions. Let us hope that it is not the medical profession that it takes away.
All right. Thanks, Asif. And yes, I want to again remind people that AI stands for artificial intelligence, right? So don't let the artificiality of it take over what is real. It should help us strengthen our real connections and improve the real intelligence quotient versus making humans dumber. So yes, rely on these tools as a learning system, but don't let them replace your intelligence. Abhi.
So I would say that while you live in this country is always supporting technologies, but at the same point of time, when it comes to healthcare is a highly regulated industry in this country. So you can see people dying in Tesla on your freeways because it's an autonomous mode. But then somebody dying because the robotic arm is coming and doing your surgery is not going to happen unless until it is cleared under the regulation manner. So even if AI is fascinating, even if it's exciting, even if it is fantastic, but at the same point of time, AI will have to convince FDA that it is safe for the patients. So I think we should not be worried about AI coming and like kind of messing up our life, because FDA is that organization which is going to ensure that it has to be regulated properly. It has to give the consistent results. It has to give you complete openness and the transparency if something goes wrong. So from that perspective, I think in a highly regulated healthcare industry of this country, you will have various ways and technologies to help you improve your lives. And I think once we have something available, the holy grail here is that how can a patient gets more convenient and comfort at his or her own home at an affordable rate. And if eventually if AI helps in reducing the healthcare cost significantly by giving you round the clock access to the medical acumen, I think then the real goal of AI will be achieved.
I love it. I wish we had more time to talk about it, but I'm really hoping that we can come back to this topic because the topic of healthcare is also very close to my heart. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people who are listening into it can relate to all the conversations we have had here. Many of us have seen either experienced firsthand or seen our friends, especially in United States, right? People not get access to good healthcare. I always talk about how healthcare in US is neither affordable nor accessible. And that is for the country that spends the most on healthcare expenses throughout the globe. 3.5 trillion, that's larger than the GDP of India, is spent every year on healthcare in the US. And if AI can help us provide better, more affordable, more accessible quality of health, that's going to be revolutionizing for the entire human race. So I'm definitely looking forward to that future. With that being said, folks, this is a wrap to another episode of the Silicon Dreams on Radio Zindagi 1550 AM. This is your show host, RJ Sonia, signing off, and again, grateful and gratitude for our guests, Abhi Gholap here and Asif Qamar. And see you all next week. Until then, Jieja.